The best camera in the world. Let's get into this. So a lot of people have made videos on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, but I thought I would do my own video kind of giving my thoughts on it. And I have a couple things that I think about this camera that it doesn't seem like a lot of people tend to talk about. No, so earlier I said that this is the best camera in the world now. Well, it's not entirely true, but the way that I like to look at it is it's the funnest camera to use. If I had to choose a camera to hold in my hand when I go out and film for myself or with somebody else, this is the camera that I want to hold because it just feels really nice to use this camera. And part of that being one of my favorite aspects to this camera is right here where, you know, normally here this is where you can change your f-stop, but this camera has your ISO, your shutter, and your white balance all right here. And when you click on one, you click ISO, you can just scroll the wheel like this and you can just change the ISO to whatever setting you want, and then you can click shutter, change the shutter, click white balance, change the white balance, and you just click on whichever one you were on, you just click on it again, and then you can change the and then you can start changing the f-stop again, which is like the main thing that you normally do. So for me, that aspect to this camera is one of my favorite aspects. It just makes shooting on the fly just really easy, really comfortable, and a lot of fun. Now another aspect too is obviously the size of it. It's a very light camera. Depends on what you want to compare it to. It's actually slightly heavier than the Sony a7S II, which is a popular camera, and that's pretty much the perfect size, and this fits the bill as well. It's a little wider, so that can be a little bit of a problem when you're trying to put it on a gimbal. That's one of its downsides. And actually, while we're at it, why don't we just talk about the major downsides of this camera, other than the fact that this is basically the best camera that there is for this price point especially. This camera has 3 weak points that are pretty minimal. They're parts that really don't matter for real photography, or just real video use in general. And that is the battery life is not the best. The screen doesn't come out at all. It's built right in there. And the autofocus is mediocre. And everything else, it just kicks ass. One great feature about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and pretty much any Blackmagic camera actually, is that they all have Blackmagic RAW, which is a RAW codec for recording RAW footage, and it's also one of the lowest bit rates for RAW footage. So that's a really nice feature to have, to be able to get that much image quality. And if you film Blackmagic RAW at 12:1, you can even record 30 frames a second 4K with just an SD card, which is really nice. It's really the only way you can record RAW onto an SD card. So again, that's just kind of showcasing what a Blackmagic camera can do that virtually no other camera can do. If I can, I try to just shoot on an SD card. I mean, the fact that you can do 30 frames a second at 4K Blackmagic RAW, you can do 1080p ProRes or 4K ProRes or whatever you want, which is fantastic. But another option in terms of a CFast card is kind of an expensive solution for storing your recording data, but the USB-C, you can get a little tiny external SD drive and mount it to some kind of rigging, and then you just plug it into the USB-C connection, and boom, there you go. You can record Blackmagic RAW 4K 60 FPS or anything else. We all know that Blackmagic just launched the Pocket 6K, which is exciting and really cool. At the same time, some people think of it and go, oh, you know, the Blackmagic 6K came out. I better return my 4K and go and get the 6K because it's a better camera and it's so wonderful and great. Well, not really if you think about it. It depends on what your usage is for. You know, pure image quality, sure, the 6K would be a better fit. But we're already dealing with amazing image quality at this point, and you have to really think about what your use case is for the camera. Are you making a film that's going to be on like a Hollywood, is it a Hollywood production, or is it going to be on the big screen? Is it going to be a fancy commercial, or is it going to be a YouTube video? Is it going to be for a small client that's not paying you a lot for the video? You know, what's the use case? Not only what is the use case, but what is your infrastructure as a content creator or as a business? What kind of server do you have? How much data do you have? How much server storage do you have for your business or for your own personal sake? And that's where the 6K doesn't quite make sense. And it kind of depends, but from what I've been hearing, it sounds, unfortunately, it sounds like you can't record Blackmagic RAW 4K on the 6K camera. You can only do ProRes at 4K, which basically makes me kind of go, well, I don't know, is there really going to be much of a difference here? Blackmagic RAW 4K with the 4K camera, or 4K ProRes on the 6K version? I don't know. In terms of image quality, it'd be pretty much like a toss-up in that sense. So you have a bigger, I mean, you have a bigger sensor, but you have a sensor with more pixels. You have a sensor with more pixels, but not necessarily a better Kodak or better resolution. And again, if you increase the resolution, I mean, 6K is just silly. You need to be a huge company to be recording 6K and for it to make sense. And then you're talking about computer hardware as well, like processors and graphics cards. It gets ludicrous. And so for basically a normal content creator, someone on a budget, someone that doesn't have access to everything, and basically for most viewers that would ever view a video about Blackmagic cameras or just cameras in general, you're going to be better off with the Pocket 4K than the 6K. If anything, for anybody, get the 4K. It's the best camera for the money. And then if you want a second camera, you could consider getting a 6K. And that brings us further into the video in terms of Blackmagic in comparison to all the other camera manufacturers. And basically, Blackmagic is kicking everybody's ass because we have the 4K and we have the 6K pocket cameras. And at this point in 2019, I wouldn't buy any other cameras than these two cameras. They're the best two cameras in the world right now for the money. And not purely for video too. That's something that I've been learning. I have been using this for shooting photos, and it's not that I'm actually shooting photos. What I do is I just set this to Blackmagic RAW, and I just make sure my shutter's high enough so I don't get blurry images, and then I can basically shoot anywhere. And I'm recording video, but I can just look through the video, grab a still on Resolve, and just plop it out, turn it into a JPEG, and there you go. It's a package deal. You get a really great camera, you also get great software, a great Kodak, and I just love the way Blackmagic does business. That's, simply put, that's what I like about them. I'm a huge advocate for open source software, and Blackmagic is a supporter of that. I'm not sure, I don't think that their software is currently open source. I think it's proprietary, which is what it is. And I'm actually still a little bit upset with Blackmagic because their support for Linux, which is, I made a Linux video in the past, my ultimate Fedora 29 video, which basically shows you how to set up Fedora, an amazing Linux operating system, and also shows you with Fedora 29 how to get Blackmagic Resolve up and running. But Blackmagic has been a little frustrating in terms of Linux, their Linux support. They claim to have Linux support, but it's not really Linux support because of a multitude of reasons that it's hard to get into. But the official distro that they support is CentOS, and I've installed CentOS and I've installed Blackmagic. It was like 16 dot something, one of the beta versions, and Fairlight had like a black screen thing going on and it just wasn't working properly. So they claim to be supporting it, but I think it only works on like certain editions or something. And that doesn't even go into the fact that using CentOS as a workstation is just not fun. I don't like to use that distro, so that's not enjoyable. But Fedora is actually a part of Red Hat Linux, which is a part of, that's the company that makes the distros CentOS and Fedora, which are two very similar Linux operating systems. But I found a way to get DaVinci Resolve working on Fedora 29, and actually I think DaVinci Resolve works fine on NVIDIA graphics cards for all the Fedora distributions, so it's not exactly an issue. But this kind of turns into a rabbit hole because I'm also a fan of AMD. I like the stuff that they do. Their GPU drivers on Linux is completely open source. Again, open source. I just think that's a better way for computer technology to go forward in the future. What I'd like to see from Blackmagic in terms of their Linux support is that they just need to release a package, both an RPM package, a deb package, and a pacman package that can be put in the repositories of all sorts of different Linux distributions. That's what I like to see from Blackmagic in terms of their software for Linux users, which is what I am. I'm a Linux user. And I'll primarily be making videos about cameras, technology, Linux, and exercise and things like that. So come on, Blackmagic, get it together, give Linux some good quality support, because there's a lot of people in the Linux world that would be jumping on your software instantaneously. They'll be camera buyers. I think anybody in Linux, people in Linux are pretty smart people, and they're probably going to look at all the different cameras out there and they're going to see Blackmagic and they go, yeah, I like these cameras. I like what they can do. But you need to better support the Linux platform to help get those customers. So it's to your benefit as well, Blackmagic. But yeah. Again, so back to the 4K, the thing that the reason why I love this camera, the reason why I'm not even really all that excited for the 6K is how much horsepower you get out of this camera is the most you can get at this size. And the Micro Four Thirds platform is also really amazing, because when I've actually looked at a lot of the lenses, now this kind of depends on how you look at it. A lot of people say good glass is heavy glass, which is true, that's true, but there are some very good pieces of glass for Micro Four Thirds that are still nice and light. And a great example is the Olympus line. And that's primarily what I recommend. If you're going to get a Blackmagic Pocket 4K, I really recommend that you basically look at the Olympus Pro line. Almost all of them are almost macro lenses, meaning I can put the lens here, put something here, and you're going to be able to focus on it. And this thing goes from 24 millimeters all the way to 200 millimeters. Plus, if you're using the Pocket and you want to do 120, or anyways, if you want to use the 1080p crop, which is a little soft for my liking, but still, it's an option. When you do that, this turns what is a 24 to 200 into a 48 to 400, which is pretty sweet. And I'm interested in their telephoto lens because that goes all the way to 300 millimeters, and if you crop in 2 times, that would be 600 millimeters. which would be a lot of fun. And again, you can get very close. When I've looked at the listings of a lot of different like Canon lenses and Nikon lenses and all of that and Sony's, they are much more limited, particularly like with a telephoto lens. If you're zoomed out, like you have to get pretty far away from the subject to get it in focus. But these Olympus lenses are pretty nice because you can get pretty dang close. It depends a little bit. Like I think if I go wide, I can get closer, but if I zoom in, it limits me. So it's not perfect, but it's better than the competition, which is all that really matters. And then when it comes to like gimbals and when it comes to hand holding and all of that, again, nothing's really lighter. You take this pocket camera, you put some kind of limit, you take this pocket camera and you take an Olympus piece of glass or any other micro four thirds glass. Olympus makes good quality glass. And when you put those on there, it's going to be the lightest possible camera that you can have, where you can shoot 4K 60 FPS RAW with an extremely low bit rate, so meaning you need less data storage. There's another YouTuber, I don't know, I remember he was talking about the two pocket cameras, and he was talking about the 6K and how that came out, and his phrase was lights out for all the competition, because that's the truth. But it's kind of, we're in a weird place right now where that's part of the reason I want to make these videos, is that I already know that I know what I'm talking about, and I have my own confidence. I have the things that I want. I have AMD hardware. I have this amazing small compact Blackmagic camera that can do virtually anything. And what I want to do is just get people to think more clearly, to actually understand how things work and basically see who's kicking ass, because that helps the market overall when you have people going towards the stuff that's actually the best, because that means that people that are making, that means like Canon, Sony, all of them, they actually have to make better cameras, because if people aren't buying their cameras, because again, like that YouTuber said, like I'm saying, lights out, these are the best cameras there are, that means that Canon, Sony, all of them, they have to change what they do in order to compete. And that's just good for the consumer. That's just good for us. So that's the whole point of making videos like this, is to try to like get people to make the right choices, like the smart choices, so that in the long run we get better and better cameras. So it's not really necessarily bad for business or anything like that. It's just that consumers, it's better for consumers to be smart, because when consumers are smart, that means technology gets better. When consumers aren't smart, technology does not get better, and technology companies will do little tiny things to make it seem like you're getting something better when you're not really getting something better. Which, I didn't bring my phone, is somewhere over here, but like phones, I mean, phone technology hasn't changed at all. I have a phone that is the LG V20, and it's my favorite phone. I literally could go shopping right now and I could look at other phones and be like, LG V20, still the best phone I see. So yeah, and that's primarily why I make a video about Blackmagic and not some other camera. If Canon or Sony want to send me a camera and they want me to look at it and say what I think, go for it. I use Sony cameras at work. I have the Sony a7S II that I use at work. It's not my camera, it's a company camera. And I don't like using it. You know, it's a camera that I use at work, which I'm supposed to be getting paid to make videos, and I don't like the camera. It ruins my experience. It makes it harder for me to do my work and to do quality work, because it's a lesser camera. It just doesn't do what this camera can do, and it doesn't do it as elegantly. It just doesn't match up. Like I said, I mean, if I'm running and gunning, this thing is really gonna do it for me, because I can just on the fly get shots. And I guess we could go further than that. Some people don't like the idea of running and gunning. They say that's not real filmmaking, blah blah blah, which is both true and not true. It's good to plan out shots. It's good to know what you're doing. But at the same time, you want to capture real moments, authentic moments. It's not every day that you're going to have, you know, a professional actor in front of you. Most of the time it's going to be people that have no idea what to do in front of a camera. So the best way to capture them is for them to not even know you're capturing them. And that's, again, another reason why I can go to 200 millimeters on this and it has IS. And, you know, when you're able to quickly set focus, quickly get a shot in a moment, you have a chance to capture something that's real and authentic and looks really good. And that takes quickness and speed and, you know, ability to use a camera quickly, not just taking your prima donna time to set up a nice fancy little shot. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And that's another thing. Like I said, the Sony a7S II, I don't like using the exterior of the camera all that much, even though I don't mind that as much. It's actually okay for the Sonys. But the menu is actually, that's where Sony completely fails. The menu system of the Sony a7S II or any of the Sony cameras, complete trash. I hate using it. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing when I'm opening up the menu. It's like I have to shift through 10 different tabs to like do one thing, where it's like this camera I click like a button or two and it's like, okay, it's done. High frame rate button. You can easily set this to be 30 frames a second, and then you can set it to 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second. And all you gotta do is just click this button. It goes 30, 120, and then back and forth. 30, 120, 120, 30, and then press it again. Or if you change the settings, you can do 30, 60, 30, 60. Obviously, you'd be cropping in if you are at like 120 or something, depending on what you're doing. So that's another great feature of the Pocket Cinema 4K. And like I said, you can do photos. Obviously the 6K makes more sense for that. Typically you want better quality, you want sharper images and higher megapixel and all that when you're doing photos, more so than video, because, well, in video, if the codec's shit, you're not going to capture that quality anyways. People don't always shoot RAW. Of course, you can shoot RAW here if you want to, and you don't need a monitor or any nonsense or anything. You just pop in the SD card and click RAW and boom, there you go. It's real nice. But yeah, you can easily capture photos for something like Instagram because, again, people are looking at these tiny little phones. 8 megapixels is more than enough to make an image look good on a tiny little phone like that. And that's where real ads are, and that's where content creation is, that's where media is. We tend to view things on our phone now more. Even me, like, even for a workstation, it's like I don't even care about TVs. I use a monitor. That's what I use. If I'm going to view videos, I'm either viewing them on my phone or I'm viewing them on a monitor that's, you know, 20 inches to like 30 inches, and that's it. Maybe even smaller. So that's, you know, come on guys. It doesn't really matter at this point. Megapixels is overblown. That is probably the biggest downside to the 4K compared to the 6K is just the megapixels. If you want the extra megapixels and you want to guarantee you have the sharpest possible image imaginable, and you don't care about data rates and you don't care about servers and all that other stuff, get the 6K instead. And it's funny talking about this camera because I'm late to the game and talking about this camera, but at the same time, you can hardly even get this camera still. I ordered this well in advance. I pre-ordered it. I knew I wanted this camera. I've already been a huge fan of Blackmagic. I'm making a feature film with their software, and like I said, lights out, Blackmagic is just kicking ass. And you know, if someone wants to compete, sure, you know, but you got to step up. You got to do something that's actually impressive. And you know, Sony they're gonna be releasing like their Sony a7S IV, and that, you know, it wasn't even impressive just looking at it. Just other than the fact that, you know, people go, well, look, it has a nice sharp sensor, and there anything else? Pretty much just the sensor, huh? Not all that impressive. And then Blackmagic releases the 6K edition to the Pocket, which basically just smashes it down instantly. And that's only the beginning, because you know, if you really want the best image quality and you don't care about how big the camera is and everything like that, I guarantee you Blackmagic is going to be releasing an Ursa Mini, and it's going to have most likely an 8K sensor that shoots at least 60 frames a second at 8K, given whatever, you know, maybe we'll see something like 4K 120 or something, and it's going to have Blackmagic RAW. Hopefully they let you use Blackmagic RAW in all factors. You know, RAW is kind of strange because as I see it and as I know it, whenever you record RAW, it crops in on the sensor to whatever resolution size you're dealing with. So, you know, if you have an 8K sensor and you want to record 6K Blackmagic RAW, it crops into 6K. If you want to do 4K, it will crop into 4K. If you want to do 2K, it crops into 2K, 1080. You see what I mean? So it actually crops in on the sensor, which I want to do more testing on that, but that begs the question, like, what's better? Would you be better off shooting ProRes at a higher resolution compared to doing the RAW cropped in? And again, then you have to compare data rates and everything, so it gets pretty complicated and messy. But, you know, that's something that can be talked about well into the future. But all I'm here to say is, you want a camera, you know, if you're doing just photography, I don't even know what to say in terms of if you're doing just photography. I'm not really all that into photography. I'm just happy to find out that I can easily do Instagram photos and whatever I really need to do photo-wise just with this thing, which is really nice. You just have to increase the shutter to make up for, you know, motion. So, you know, don't want the motion to get all messed up depending on what you're going for. But in the world of photography, I mean, something like a Canon Mark IV and stuff like that probably makes sense. But again, you're getting a camera that is gimped. Make no mistake. I mean, a Canon camera is just naturally gimped. It records video, but you can't really record any good Kodaks or anything. It has nothing, just autofocus, which I like never use. I have a 6500 at work that I used to use the autofocus on the 6500, and I just kind of got sick of the 6500 image quality, and I just realized that I could get good motion shots without using autofocus. Pro tip on that, you know, side shots work really good. You can go side to side and maintain focus. So, which kind of sucks, not going in and out. Otherwise you need a focus puller or something. But that works overall for me. I suppose 6500 would do okay. Though its autofocus has actually failed me plenty of times anyways, and I'm sure most autofocuses would. The dual pixel autofocus from Canon is probably the best autofocus system that I've ever seen. That's on my C100. But that autofocus system on the C100, it's kind of gimped because it's just the middle of the frame, so you're pretty limited in that sense. But yeah, lights out. Blackmagic just kicking ass and taking names. And that's kind of been, like I said, there's been a bit of a theme here where fanboyism and not logic has kind of taken over the marketplace, where people just buy Canon or they buy Sony, or they, when it comes to computers, they get NVIDIA graphics cards and stuff like that just because it's the name. Oh, it's NVIDIA. I'm gonna get NVIDIA because that's the name of the company. I like the name. But they don't sit to actually think, like, what is the actual best device? How fast is the processor? You know, how fast is the graphics card? What are the options with the graphics card? What are the options with the camera? You know, what performance am I getting for the money as well? you know, I mean, it's hilarious. It really is just hilarious. You know, because AMD launched the Navi graphics cards that are basically the best you can get for the money, and you know, Nvidia is selling cards that has slightly more performance for like another $100 or $200, and it's just, why would you buy that? And they don't have open source drivers on Linux. Why? I don't understand. Make me understand, please. Okay, so I talked earlier about battery life being a problem, but it's kind of an easy fix. And also rigging. You can obviously start to rig this thing up. So I got a nice little system here, a cage to put on the pocket. And then I got a battery pack. So, and it uses a V-mount. Got a V-mount plate right here on the cage. Go ahead and slide that on there. And this will give us a lot more battery life. If I can ever get this thing. Basically, it now it's going to start working like a C100. And it's not, in that sense, it's not going to be lighter than the C100 when you spoof it up that much. So we have a 12 volt little adapter here. This is a D-tap wire that, and then it has, this is some kind of like proprietary Blackmagic thing, which is kind of a downside, but it works. Same sort of thing with the Mini XLR. That's another, I forgot to mention that earlier. So these are basically, in here we have the USB-C, we have the 12 volt power, and we have the XLR, Mini XLR. And basically with these options, we can have nice, really good, clean audio. We can record any sort of codec that we want that takes up a lot of data, because we got USB-C here and right into a solid state drive. We got the 12 volt power club, 12 volt power cable. So I'll plug that in there. And yeah, I mean, when you plug this in, you're gonna get like 4 hours of battery life, depending on what you're dealing with. I think this is about 4 hours, which is 95 watt hour. And they have bigger ones too, if you want, which means you'll be carrying more weight. But I don't know why you'd be shooting more than 4 hours. Again, it has the XLR. So you get Mini XLR, so you get nice clean audio. You'll have to get a proprietary Mini XLR cable from Blackmagic, which they still make a lot less proprietary crap than a lot of other companies. And you got the USB-C. I didn't really talk about some of these other features that are just traditional. You have a 3.5 millimeter mic port, you have a headphone port, you have an HDMI port. The magnification button right here works pretty good. You click it and you can actually move the frame around with your finger and adjust. It maximizes into it. I don't know if it's ×5 or ×10. It's not that great, but it punches in and then you can move to any spot on the frame with the touchscreen, which I didn't realize until a little ways further, and it works okay. It also has an autofocus, tap to touch, which works okay for setting up a focus. It's not really usable mid-shot, but it does work for just getting something into focus when you need to do that. The still button actually never has really worked for me. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I don't care. Like I said, you can basically pull photos out of the raw footage when you're shooting. So that's what I tend to do. In terms of just the battery life for these things, with the Blackmagic, a lot of people have complained about this, but my experience has not been that bad, actually. I went traveling and just kind of went around and shot stuff. Went to Salt Lake City and filmed the Capitol there, and went to Phoenix, a couple other little places, and I felt like the battery is pretty solid. I just brought 3 batteries, and I went and I filmed some video and filmed some photos for basically like 6 hours, and I never ran out of battery life. But I was shooting in a very precise way. Over time, when you shoot tons of video, tons of photos, over time you realize that, like, you know, a shot only lasts like 3 seconds. So you don't really need to waste a lot of time recording. So I'd walk around, try to find something that I want. I'd have my camera off, just looking for what I want to do. Then I'd find something, turn the camera on, start to set focus, grab the shot, turn the camera back off, and I would just kind of wander around doing that. And I got a fair bit of footage doing that, and yeah, the battery life was just pretty solid, you know. It goes for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how you're shooting. You know, if you're on all the time, yeah, you're gonna get like 30 minutes tops. But then when you are, again, like I'm saying, if you're kind of walking around, turning your camera off and on, it might actually last you like an hour or an hour and a half, depending on how you're doing things. So I didn't really experiment with that much until I went traveling. That was actually the first time that I kind of just shot with the camera without this big setup that I have like right here, and I really enjoyed it. And that's really something I actually like doing just for my own relaxation. It's a lot of fun, and I didn't realize I could get away with it with just little batteries. And it's great to find that out, because it's so much fun to just hold such a small camera and just be able to kind of wander around and just capture images. And like I said, with the Olympus lenses, I mean, they're long. The focal ranges, you know, 24 to 200. You can just get all sorts of different shots. That one has IS, and depends on how you shoot. I like to shoot with high f-stop. I like to shoot around like f8 or f11. That's how I like to film. I like a deep depth of field. That's something I've always enjoyed. I prefer an overall image, an overall frame that has a lot going on in it. Landscape, you know, scenery, where there's people in the frame, but there's more things going on. Is the type of photography and videography I've always liked. That's the kind of shots that I like to see in a film. You know, you watch something like Blade Runner, and you see, you know, these big wide open landscape shots showing the cyberpunk city. Things like that are things that I personally really enjoy. So normally I prefer shooting wide and capturing things like that rather than punching right into someone's face and kind of withholding everything that's actually going on in a scene or what have you. In terms of, you know, seeing what the exposure is of your shot, it has false color and it has zebraing, focus peaking. I really like the focus peaking. It's a red. You have the option of different colors. I choose red and it works really good. I really like it. The zebraing works solid. The false color I really like. False color is really cool. You can really see, you just click the button and you're like, oh, I see where the shadows are, where I'm losing tons of information, and I can see the light where it's completely peaked and not good. So I've really enjoyed false color. False color is really cool, that I have not used in other cameras. I have a friend that had a monitor that had false color, and that was cool to see. At the time I didn't really understand it, but I understand it now, having fiddling with it on this camera, and it's kind of becoming one of my new favorite additions. I do wish that this camera would have had a waveform on it. The C100 has a waveform on it, and that's two of my favorite things. I like false color, and I also like waveforms. I like both of those more than zebra, but they all sort of work, and a lot of times you can just do things by eye to some extent. But I've been happy with that. So that is another just great aspect to the camera. And another important part that I didn't really talk about is very important and very good on this camera. Much better than all the competition. Unless you're talking about like a C100 or C200, where you're talking about expensive cameras that are meant for video and they weigh a lot and they're a lot to carry around, and you got to put big lenses on them and everything like that. Which again, when you get to that point, you start wondering, you know, you start thinking to yourself, okay, how much am I getting paid for what I'm doing? You know, how much time is this taking? How much effort am I putting into it? All this other stuff that goes into it. And that's what's great about this camera, is that, I mean, you can do this, you can use this camera for anything, and it's fun to use. It's just such a fun camera to use, and you know, you can basically do anything with it. I don't need the C100, I got this. Though the C100 is great. But yeah, this bad boy, game changer. Blackmagic, kicking ass. Where are you, Canon? Where are you, Sony? Huh? Nikon? Anybody? Panasonic? Do you guys make cameras anymore? Do you? You guys make cameras? I'll have to look into that. I didn't know. I thought Blackmagic was the only one making cameras these days. But anyway, again, this is DP27, the light.